So, hello and welcome back yet again. I hope you guys are doing awesome. And I figured we would do a little bit of a chit chat before we get around to reading our next Edgar Allan Poe story. So, as always, there will be timestamps. If you don't want to listen to me babbling, you can just jump ahead to the story. But otherwise, I figured I would do a little itty bitty mail call. I didn't open everything on camera this time, mostly because it's not really viewer mail, it's more friend of the channel mail. But I've talked about them so many times. Smokey, Steve, and Mark, great friends of the channel, great guys, great channel if you like things that are crafty and cooking and stuff like that. Mark does stuff like that. If you like mental health talk and maybe follow some of Girl World, it's a thing. It's my guilty pleasure. Um, Steve does stuff like that. They do talking about mental health. They just have a good time. They're just a great variety channel. And Mark does so many projects. And sometimes I do the project as well, and it never comes out as good as his. And one that I had thought about doing but hadn't is now sitting right behind me because Mark sent it to me. And I didn't open up the package on camera because he had sent me a private message saying that he packed it as good as he could, but he wasn't sure if I was going to have to like get out my hot glue gun and fix it. I didn't. It's perfect and I love it. It's a bonfire lamp, and they did it this year. This year during the summer, they did their Camp SSAM, Camp Smokey, Steve, and Mark. And they did a whole series over the entire summer doing all sorts of different like camp crafting activities. And one of them was making these little bonfire lamps. They actually made a couple different like fire pit lamps and things like that, but this is just phenomenal. It's beautiful, and he made it himself. I really like, and I'm going to have to look and see if I can pick up some more of them, these flickering, like flame looking light bulbs, because I just love that effect. It's beautiful. And then he also sent a couple other things. And it's funny because one of them is something that I had made that had been a craft that he had done, I think, last week. And he had done some big ones and some little ones, but unfortunately, I didn't have all of the same items. And I still don't have googly eyes for mine, so his is much better, and it's very cute. It's just a little ghost magnet. Very, very cute. I'll show you the one I made, but I didn't have just white rope, so mine's kind of a rainbow ghost, and it needs eyeballs. I think his is much cuter. So there's that, and a couple little, a soothing candle and a balance candle. They smell lovely. And some body balm that Mark makes. It's very moisturizing, and he makes it himself, and it just smells wonderful. So I thought that was so cool. Other than that, it's been just sort of a week for me. The temperatures have been up and down, and I've been dealing with, and it's my own fault because when I first started my epic walks again, I was walking in shoes that just were not right, and my blanket behind me keeps falling down. That's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. But I've been walking in, honestly, some pretty crappy shoes. And I thought that I had just bruised my heel. And I mean, I didn't see a bruise, but that's what it kind of felt like. It felt like I had bruised the bottom of my foot because of my really cheap, really thin, really bad shoes that I was wearing. So I got some new shoes, and they were so much better. They still are. And I just kept on walking. And I was like, why is my foot not feeling better? And then I was paying attention to it and I was like, and weirdly enough, between a quarter and a half mile in on any of my walks, my feet felt fine. And they would feel fine till I got home and sat down. And then I would get up to try and walk, and ooh, my right foot, just instant pain. And weirdly enough to me, when I first would wake up in the morning, walking was almost impossible. So I did a little bit of Googling, and it looks like maybe plantar fasciitis, which sounds absolutely miserable. So I've kind of backed off on the walking, which means I either have to back off a lot on eating or figure out an alternate exercise so that I can keep eating more than 1,000 calories a day, because I'm really short. And losing weight when you're 52 and only 5 feet tall, it becomes more and more tricky. It's very annoying. You know, when I was younger, I could just hit the gym a couple days a week and maybe cut out the Coke and lose weight. And now it's like, no, now we have to do a lot more. It's fine though. I haven't gained weight, but the last 2 weeks I also haven't lost any weight. I should pull the bike back out, but I'm a big baby and having a sore rear end is just, I haven't decided if it's worth it or not. Plus, I know that it's going to snow soon. I'm kind of wondering if maybe cross country skiing wouldn't aggravate my foot. I don't know. We'll see. But that's about it for the week. My Brussels sprouts are still growing, which I have to admire those. I'm going to have to plant more of them next year, and I'm going to have to make sure to water them more consistently. But they're still growing, and I think by the time the snow flies, whenever that is, hopefully I will at least have one side dish worth of Brussels sprouts. Crossing my fingers. I figure even if they're not big enough to really roast, I can just lop them off the stem and toss them into like a stir fry, because I feel like they would go in a stir fry. So yeah. But yeah, that's kind of been my week. It's just sort of been there. Nothing exciting, nothing fabulous, just sort of a week. But that's okay. Sometimes you have to have those kinds of weeks. So, curious to know how your week has been. And with that, I think it's probably story time. Now, as to today's story by Edgar Allan Poe, nobody left me any comments, so I actually talked to Hazel, who you might know from leaving comments or possibly coming to some of my live streams, and she gave me a suggestion. I should have told her to leave it in the comments section, but you know, she did give me a suggestion that hopefully I won't butcher any of the pronunciations in, because it's the one that I wasn't really sure about, although it's a story I do remember well for being not so much unsettling in the story, although it is, but just the whole idea behind it. And that's something that I've noticed with Edgar Allan Poe is the stories are short and they're just little snapshots, but they linger in your mind, which I think is Poe's true genius. So with that, we are going to read The Cask of Amontillado. I think that's how you say it. Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. The 1,000 injuries of Fortuno I had borne as best as I could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitively settled, but the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed have I given Fortuno cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile was now at the thought of his immolation. He had a weak point, this Fortuno, although in other regards he was a man to be respected and even feared. He prided himself on his connoisseurship in wine. Few Italians have the true virtuoso spirit. For the most part, their enthusiasm is adopted to suit the time and opportunity, to practice imposture upon the British and Australian millionaires. In painting and gemmery, Fortuno, like his countrymen, was a quack. But in the matter of old wines, he was sincere. In this respect, I did not differ from him materially. I was skillful in the Italian vintages myself, and bought largely whenever I could. It was about dusk, one evening during the supreme madness of the carnival season, that I encountered my friend. He accosted me with excessive warmth, for he had been drinking much. The man wore motley. He had on a tight-fitting party-striped dress, and his head was surmounted by the conical cap and bells. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I should never have done wringing his hand. I said to him, "My dear Fortuno, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today! But I have received a pipe of what passes for Amontillado, and I have my doubts." "How?" said he. "Amontillado? A pipe? Impossible! And in the middle of the carnival?" "I have my doubts," I replied, "and I was silly enough to pay the full Amontillado price without consulting you on the matter. You are not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain." "Amontillado?" "I have my doubts." "Amontillado?" "And I must satisfy them." "Amontillado?" "As you are engaged, I am on my way to Lucchesi. If anyone has a critical turn, it is he. He will tell me—" "Lucchesi cannot tell Amontillado from sherry." "And yet some fools will have it that his taste is a match for your own." "Come, let us go." "Whither?" "To your vaults." "My friend, no. I will not impose upon your good nature. I perceive that you have an engagement. Lucchesi—" "I have no engagement. Come." "My friend, no. It is not the engagement, but the severe cold with which I perceive you have been afflicted. The vaults are insufferably damp. They are encrusted with nitre." "Let us go none the less. The cold is merely nothing. Amontillado? You have been imposed upon. And as for Lucchesi, he cannot distinguish sherry from Amontillado." Thus speaking, Fortuno possessed himself of my arm, putting on a mask of black silk, and drawing a reliquaire closely about my person, I suffered him to hurry me to my plateau. There were no attendants at home. They had absconded to make merry in honor of the time. I had told him that I should not return until the morning, and I had given them explicit orders not to stir from the house. These orders were sufficient, I well knew, to ensure their immediate disappearance, one and all, as soon as I had turned my back. I took from their scones 2 flambeaux, and giving one to Fortuno, I bowed him through several suites of rooms to the archway that led to the vaults. I passed down a long and winding staircase, requesting him to be cautious as he followed. We came at length to the foot of the descent and stood together on the damp ground of the catacombs of the Montresors. The gait of my friend was unsteady, and the bells upon his cap jingled as he strode. "The pipe?" said he. "It is farther on," said I. "But observe the white web work which gleams from these cavern walls." He turned toward me and looked into my eyes with 2 filmy orbs that distilled the rheum of intoxication. "Niter?" he said at length. "Niter," I replied. "How long have you had that cough?" My poor friend found it impossible to reply for many minutes. "It's nothing," he said at last. "Come," I said with decision, "we will go back. Your health is precious. You are rich, admired, beloved. You are happy, as once I was. You are a man to be missed. For me, it is no matter. We will go back. You will be ill. I can't be responsible. And besides, there is Lucchesi." "Enough," he said. "The cough is a mere nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough." "True, true," I replied. "And indeed I had no intention of alarming you unnecessarily, but you should use all proper caution. A draught of the Medoc will defend us from the damp. Here, I knocked off the neck of a bottle, which I drew from a long row of its fellows that lay upon the mold. Drink," I said, presenting him the wine. He raised it to his lips with a leer. He paused and nodded to me familiarly while the bells jingled. "I drink," he said, "to be buried that repose, or to the buried that repose all around us." "And I to your long life." He again took my arm, and we proceeded. "These vaults," he said, "are extensive." "The Montresors," I told him, "were a great and numerous family." "I forget your arms." "A huge human foot d'or in a field azure, the foot crushing a serpent rampant whose fangs are embedded in the heel." "And the motto?" "Nemo mi ipiun lacet." "Good," he said. The wine sparkled in his eyes, and the bells jingled. My own fancy grew warm with the Medoc. We had passed through the walls of piled bones, with casks and puncheons intermingling into the innermost recesses of the catacombs. I paused again, and this time I made bold to seize Fortuno by the arm above the elbow. "The niter," I said. "See, it increases. It hangs like moss upon the vault. We are below the river bed. The drops of moisture trickle among the bones. Come, we will go back before it's too late. Your cough." "It is nothing," he said. "Let us go on, but first, another draught of the Medoc." I broke and reached to a flagon of de Gave. He emptied it at a breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed and threw the bottle upward with a gesticulation I did not understand. I looked at him in surprise. He repeated the movement, a grotesque one. "You do not comprehend," he said. "Not I," I replied. "Then you are not of the Brotherhood." "How?" "You are not of the Masons?" "Yes, yes," I said. "Yes, yes." "You? Impossible. A Mason?" A Mason," I replied. "A sign," he said. "It is this," I answered, producing a trowel from beneath the folds of my reliquaire. "You jest," he exclaimed, recoiling a few paces. "But let us proceed to the Amontillado." "Be it so," I said, replacing the tool beneath the cloak and again offering him my arm. He leaned upon it heavily. We continued our route in search of the Amontillado. We passed through a range of low arches, descended, passed on, and descending again, arrived at a deep crypt in which the foulness of the air caused our flambeaux to rather glow instead of flame. At the most remote end of the crypt, there appeared another, less spacious. Its walls had been lined with human remains, piled to the vault overhead in the fashion of the great catacombs of Paris. 3 sides of this interior crypt were still ornamented in this manner. From the 4th, the bones had been thrown down and lay promiscuously upon the earth, forming at one point a mound of some size. Within the wall, thus exposed by the displacing of the bones, we perceived a still interior recess, in depth about 4 feet, in width 3, in height 6 or 7. It seemed to have been constructed for no especial use within itself, but formed merely the interval between 2 of the colossal supports of one roof of the catacombs, and was backed by one of their circumcising walls of solid granite. It was in vain that Fortuno, uplifting his dull torch, endeavored to pry into the depth of the recess. Its termination the feeble light did not enable us to see. "Proceed," I said. "Herein is the Amontillado. As for Luchesi—" "He is an ignoramus," interrupted my friend, as he stepped unsteadily forward, while I followed immediately at his heels. In an instant, he had reached the extremity of the niche, and finding his progress arrested by the rocks, stood stupidly bewildered. A moment more, and I had fettered him to the granite. In its surface were 2 iron staples, distant from each other about 2 feet horizontally. From one of these depended a short chain, from the other a padlock. Throwing the links about his waist, it was but the work of a few seconds to secure it. He was too much astounded to resist. Withdrawing the key, I stepped back from the recess. "Pass your hand," I said, "over the wall. You cannot help feeling the nitre. Indeed, it is very damp. Once more, let me implore you to return." "No? Then I positively leave you, but I first must render you all the little attentions within my power." "The Amontillado!" ejaculated my friend, not yet recovered from his astonishment. "True," I said. "Amontillado." As I said these words, I busied myself among the pile of bones of which I had before spoken. Throwing them aside, I soon uncovered a quantity of building stone and mortar. With these materials, and with the aid of my trowel, I began vigorously to wall up the entrance of the niche. I had scarcely laid the first tier of masonry when I discovered that the intoxication of Fortunato had in a great measure worn off. The earliest indication I had of this was a low moaning cry from the depth of the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. There was then a long and obstinate silence. I laid the second tier, and the third, and the fourth, and then I heard the furious vibration of the chain. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which that I might hearken to it with the most satisfaction. I stopped my labors, and I sat down upon the bones. When at last the clanking subsided, I resumed the trowel, and I finished without interruption the fifth, sixth, and seventh tier. The wall was now nearly upon a level with my breast. I again paused, and holding the flambeau over my mason work, threw a few feeble rays upon the figure inside. A succession of loud and shrill screams, bursting suddenly from the throat of the chained form, seemed to thrust me violently back. For a moment, I hesitated. I trembled. Unsheathing my rapier, I began to grope about it, with it about. Unsheathing my rapier, I began to grope with it about the recess, but the thought of an instant reassured me. I placed my hand upon the solid fabric of the catacombs, and I felt satisfied. I reapproached the wall. I replied to the yells of him who clamored. I re-echoed, I aided, I surpassed them in volume and strength. I did this, and the one clamoring grew still. It was now midnight, and my task was drawing to a close. I had completed the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th tier. I had finished a portion of the last and the 11th, and there remained but a single stone to be fitted and plastered in. I struggled with its weight. I placed it partially in its desired position, but now there came from within the niche a low laugh that raised the hairs on my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice, which I had difficulty in recognizing that as being the noble Fortuno. The voice said, "A very good joke indeed, an excellent jest. We will have many a rich laugh about it at the Plazo. Over wine?" "The Amontillado," I said. "Yes, the Amontillado. But is it not getting late? Will they not be awaiting us at the Plazo? The Lady Fortuno and the rest? Let us be gone." "Yes," I said. "Let us be gone." "For the love of God, Montresor!" "Yes," I said. "For the love of God." But to these words I hearkened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient, and I called aloud, "Fortuno!" No answer. I called again, "Fortuno!" No answer still. I thrust a torch through the remaining aperture, and I let it fall within. There came forth in return only a jingling of the bells. My heart grew sick. On account of the dampness of the catacombs, I hastened to make an end of my labor. I forced the last stone into its position. I plastered it up. Against the new masonry, I re-erected the old rampart of bones. For the half-century, no mortal has disturbed them. In place requiescant. And that murder is the end of the Cask of Amontillado. I wonder what Fortuno did to end up murdered and walled alive into a catacomb. That's one of those that the imagery of it has stuck with me. And I've seen it in other literature. I think Anne Rice had in her Witching Hour series, she had some members of the Tamalska walled up alive, which it very much harkened to that. And ugh, I can't think of very many worse ways to go. Thank you, Mr. Poe. I know what I'm going to be dreaming about tonight. If you have a suggestion in the works of Edgar Allan Poe for Spooky Week, drop them in the comments down below. I would love to read one of your favorites. But until then, sleep well, don't have any bad dreams, and I'll see you tomorrow.